Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the 4Cs for SAP Business One. Today we have a special guest with us, Byron Thompson, President of Third Wave Business Systems. Welcome, Byron.
Thanks, Tyson. Happy to be on.
So, Byron, you're a first-time guest of the podcast, and I know you're a long-time listener. So, normally we'll kind of roll into a quote, and then we'll talk about the topic, and then we'll close this podcast out. The quote that I brought today for us to discuss is around employee engagement is an investment we make for the privilege of staying in business by Ian Hutchinson. What are your thoughts on this quote, Byron?
I really like this quote, and I think, oftentimes employee engagement can be viewed as a thing that is measured to be external facing, to either show metrics or put it up on a recruiting board or report out to somebody else to show, hey, look at how good our company is. But really, thinking about the word here, privilege of thinking about it on an internal basis of for all the things that your team members do to keep your organization running day to day, that's truly a privilege of the time that they're giving to you. And being able to truly focus on that as a service back to your employees, as opposed to something that's just going to be shared externally.
With the Great Resignation, I think this quote is a little bit more relevant today than it might have been, 20, 30 years ago. Right now, a lot of the companies that I'm talking with, they're saying that they're assuming that their employees are being headhunted like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I did a little bit of reading over the weekend, and I found out that there is 1.7 open jobs to every job candidate out in the marketplace right now. So organizations, I think, do have to think about what their relationship with their employee truly is, and tying that together into how that ties into the overall objective of the organization and where the organization wants to go as a business, which kind of leads us into the next area of our podcast today. I know you have an MBA, so you probably spent a lot of time both in case studies and also in your work experience working in organizations on helping define True North and also around this employee engagement. So maybe just give us your thoughts on how an organization could, kind of provide that North Star for employees to really feel like they're engaged and contributing to the overall organization.
Yeah, for every organization, their True North is going to be a little bit different, and it's probably going to be determined in several ways, just by the history and the culture of the organization, the way they do things, their values. It might come out of, strategic planning sessions or looking at how a business markets itself and communicates that to their customers and their partners. All of those are multiple different ways that might point to that True North. And for example, for us at Third Wave, one of our North Stars is really the concept of longevity, having very long customer relationships and very long employee relationships. And we were just discussing in a town hall last week that exactly half of the people in our organization have been around for more than 10 years, which I think is pretty remarkable and hard to find in many places. But when you look at all those different varieties of a True North or a North Star, one way that I think about it in terms of how to communicate it with employees is the 4 Ps. Here we are on the 4 Cs. We'll talk about the 4 Ps being picture, purpose, plan, and part. So being able to paint a picture to your employees of what is the future going to look like, or why are you undertaking a certain initiative? And what's the purpose of it? Explaining the why. It's not very compelling to just tell people what they need to do. Explaining the why gives people a lot more agency and creates opportunities for buy-in. And then the plan, being able to explain how it's going to get done to show them that this is possible. And then lastly, the part that each individual has to play and being able to break down some of those barriers across different functional areas to show how teams working in coordination is all going to work together towards that true north.
What is it that organizations can do to really kind of help with recruiting and onboarding so that they can kind of start seeing those 4 Ps right from, the time that they're, applying for a job, knowing that, there's 1.7 job openings for every candidate that's out there looking?
Yeah, on the topic of recruiting and bringing people into your organization, one piece of it is being very intentional about the role that you're asking people to do and spending a lot of that time upfront really planning. I think most people think about recruiting and it takes a long time. You have a lot of conversations with potential candidates, but really a lot of the work should be happening before you even have that first screening phone call. Getting multiple perspectives across the organization about what kind of role you need to fill, what are some of the measures to success of what you want to see that person accomplish in that role, and thinking about things like, will this candidate that I'm ultimately going to speak with, are they going to be happy in our organization 5 years from now? How might this role evolve? What are they looking for out of their career, to really make sure that you're bringing on the right candidate and that the candidate is going to be happy coming into the team. Another element around the topic of recruiting is the idea of a 12-star recruiting experience. And there's a mentor of mine who I don't know if he coined it or just passed it along, but talking about as he was building up his organization is going beyond the concept of 5 stars. So, it's almost as if you see so many elements in our day-to-day life where we can rate everything from restaurants to ride sharing, and 5 stars starts to become table stakes. And him and his team really thought about, okay, what would it take to have a 12-star recruiting experience to really just go above and beyond from that very first interaction with somebody who's thinking about joining your team, to really show them that you're valuing them, that you're listening to them, that you want it to be a long-term relationship, and using that as a framework as kind of as a true north within the recruiting experience is, we want this to be a 12-star experience, which could include the way in which you communicate with the potential candidate, and getting them excited about the opportunity, but it could also mean communicating quickly when it's not going to fit, to make sure that you're not leaving somebody waiting a long time to hear back from you, even if they aren't going to end up joining your team, making sure that they have a positive impression and positive experience in every interaction that they have speaking with your team.
It's a great way of putting it, and it's interesting that 12-star was chosen and not like 7-star, and yeah, so those stars, like the 12 doesn't mean anything in regards to like the number of steps or anything like that. It's just really around leveling up and providing something that's more than double of what an excellent standard would be.
Right, and when you think about, as you quoted, that there's 1.7 jobs available for every one applicant, the people who are able to get closest to that 12-star recruiting experience are going to end up bringing on the most talented, the best candidates into their organization.
Yeah, I read on LinkedIn on the weekend when I was researching for today's podcast, there was a recruiter that posted that their next week, out of all the interviews that they had lined up, everybody had already accepted another job before they even got to like interview with that recruiter. And that's just how tight the job market is. So anything that's going to stand out above and beyond, is going to make somebody maybe consider, taking that interview versus just taking, something that's offered in front of them. So I've been working with you for, I guess, over 6 months now. And one of the things that I've noticed about you is that you are a great cheerleader. You stand on the sidelines and, you're in the trenches with us. You're you're constantly encouraging us, you're constantly encouraging the organization to do better. So what are some of your thoughts around encouragement and how that ties into employee engagement?
The way in which encouragement comes out is another one of those elements where it's going to vary for every organization and by role and the type of work that people are doing. I think, in many organizations, people talk a lot about innovation or agility or creativity. And for those more intangible aspects of work, I really think it's important to be able to block time for innovation, for example. So it's if your true north, if your strategy is to be an organization that's constantly evolving and adapting and innovating, well, you have to recognize that all the hours in a day could be completely consumed by responding to customer inbounds, dealing with employee matters, just all of the day-to-day blocking and tackling. And I think it's important to be able to allocate a set amount of time to give people time to think in the future and think around those things of being creative or innovative, and literally down to the tactics of, do you encourage people on your team to block an hour every week to just learn something new or be creative or research a new product that might be coming to market, to be able to give people the encouragement to let them know, hey, you don't just need to be stuck in the status quo. What else could we be pushing towards that's going to be meaningful for yourself and for the organization?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this, and one is this podcast is a good example of that, where this is something that is of interest to me, and I kind of came to the team and said, I'm thinking about doing a podcast around what we do as an organization and how we can help the small mid-sized businesses grow and innovate. So that was kind of one thing that's a good example of that encouragement around letting some creative expression of your employees come out, and as long as it's aligned with kind of the strategy of the organization and that true north that we talked about, let it happen and see what can happen. And the Post-it note was actually invented as a side project that an employee was working on just out of interest purposes, and 3M kind of said, yeah, go ahead and work on this side project, and the Post-it notes evolved, and it certainly changed 3M as a business. It changed everybody's desktop across the world as well, with the invention of the Post-it note. So sometimes that creative time and that encouragement around the creative time is can lead to pivots and adjustments within the organization, and also with what maybe the employee is truly good at as well. Who would have thought a colorblind accountant could do graphic design, for example?
Yeah. As you were talking about the example of 3M, it brought to mind the difference between activity and productivity. I think, in conventional management textbooks and case studies, it might talk a lot about productivity and activity and making sure people are in their seats at a certain time, clocking out at another time, and that their day needs to be filled with activity, and that activity will lead to productive outcomes. But that's not necessarily the case, especially now, the way in which a lot of work is being done.
Byron, it's a good point that you kind of bring up, and how does this apply to the organization that has people on the manufacturing floor, or people that are picking and packing orders, and how do you give them that creative encouragement to rethink, or to collect some thoughts and to do side things?
I think one avenue is just creating space for them to voice their opinions. I think one of the most powerful phrases within an organization is asking somebody, what would you do? And coupling that with blocking out time for one-on-ones, and whether that happens on a weekly basis, a monthly, quarterly, whatever time you're able to give and whatever time somebody else finds meaningful for them, being able to block out some of that space and ask for people's input. I've found oftentimes people are more than willing to share. They just need an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and I have a good example of that in one of my prior lives. We redesigned the whole production floor based off of, the employees actually spending a little bit of that, quote unquote window time, thinking about what would be a better way to flow goods through the floor, and empowering them to make those decisions, and to ask for certain things. And it ended up that we had to like put some welding screens up and change some layouts of things. But when it's their idea for the flow, and they're the ones walking the floor and taking those 20 steps to grab a bolt or whatever it is, a lot of times they're going to have the best idea on the best way to do things like that.
Absolutely.
What are some things that organizations can do to, gain insight and feedback from the employees, and also provide feedback to the employees?
There are countless articles, books, and seminars on different approaches to all the various ways of collecting feedback, as you noted, from the 360 reviews, bottoms up, top down, annual reviews, recurring on those weekly touch points. I think it's an area why people sometimes feel overwhelmed by it. It's too difficult to instill a culture of feedback or a feedback program. But putting all of those different tactical approaches aside, just starting with creating opportunities to get and give feedback is always a positive step in the right direction. I think one element that's very important is trying to make it data-driven in some way. And so oftentimes along the areas of feedback or culture or engagement, it's an area of business where people often operate by gut instinct, where they feel, hey, all of our employees are very happy, everything's good, we don't need to make too many changes. But things evolve over time. We're in a different working environment, and I think it's important to add some kind of data element in to be able to track over time. And one of the conventional ways is an employee NPS score. And I think you can find several articles that would say, NPS is no longer what you should be focused on, or there's other metrics that are more accurate, but at least it's a start. And for many organizations, it's very quick. You can put together a scale, send it out in a survey, and start collecting data in a matter of 10 minutes or so, and being able to see if there's any variations in your organization's net promoter score internally, and be able to try to correlate that with some events that are happening in the organization, can at least give you an avenue to start asking some of those more detailed questions to get into the qualitative of, okay, why is this changing? But at least you have some data to support it, or data to support that, hey, things are great. We have industry leading employee NPS. So let's keep rocking and rolling. Another way that I think about feedback is it can oftentimes feel uncomfortable, because we think about that scenario in the annual review where it's maybe going to make or break somebody's raise, or maybe it results in turnover. But I think no matter what, feedback is a gift. And being able to share that feedback candidly with another person, I think it's very important to come into the mindset and recognize that the person giving feedback is doing so with positive intent, and it's giving a gift to you. And the way in which you respond to it is really up to yourself. You don't necessarily have to agree with every single piece of feedback you receive, but acknowledging that it's legitimate, that it came from somebody else, that they took their time to provide you with that feedback. And then you can think about within how you want to show up on a day-to-day basis, what elements of the feedback are you going to incorporate in how you show up every day?
Yeah, that's great. The quantitative and qualitative, and just start by doing something. But I think it also comes down to, once an employee understands their purpose and their part within the organization, and how it all kind of, drives forward. I think some of those NPS scores and some of that, feedback and some of the cultural elements of an organization would certainly change as well along with that. So, as an organization gets a little bit more strategic and focused, you hope that kind of flows down to the employees, and through some of these engagement things that we're talking about today, that you're truly getting the results that you're expecting. So I think, not only is it the feedback's the gift that you talked about, but it's also just, is the organization on track with what's going on? And I mean, there's the balanced scorecard approach to looking at your organization, and ensuring that it's just not about the revenue growth, or the number of channels, or the number of units they're moving, or the throughput, that it's really more encompassing than just that. So the feedback for the employee is important, but I think the feedback as an organization, and measuring data and looking at that data objectively and also with a critical eye becomes an important task, Byron.
I like how you tied back to the earlier elements of our conversation with the picture in part and thinking about the organization as a whole as relates to feedback. So you can think about an example where perhaps a manager has told an employee on the shop floor, hey, you need to take more initiative. You need to be more creative. I want to see more ideas from you. Okay, well, there's a piece of feedback. We can decide how we want to respond to it, but let's start unraveling that and look at the encouragement piece. Does that employee have the time to be able to think creatively and think outside the box? Are they incentivized to do so? Are they, when you look at the 12-star recruiting experience, did you recruit someone who you expected to be innovative and think outside the box? Did they know that was going to be an expectation placed upon them before they received that feedback? And then ultimately, is that innovative outside the box thinking part of the overall culture that drives the true north for your organization, and being able to layer all these things together?
How can information systems streamline your business? So for example, the accounts payable department, do they really need to be in the office every day, or can the mail be scanned in, or can you get more of your invoices emailed to you? Can you run, instead of running a check run, can you use EFT? So these are some of the things to think about as an organization, or as well as, like, you don't need the accounts payable department in the office all the time.
And in some cases, people get a little nervous about the impact of technology and think, okay, technology is going to replace people's jobs, but really thinking about it from the standpoint of reimagining people's jobs and being able to still keep that same employee employed, but have them focused on either more meaningful work or more rewarding work for them, more challenging for their day-to-day in the ways that they want to be challenged, as opposed to taking information from a notebook and keying it into an Excel spreadsheet that's then going to be keyed in by somebody else into an ERP system. Being able to reduce all of those steps and just let it be handled on the back end, And, Tyson, you and I were on a call with a customer recently who was talking about, well, I think one of our favorite quotes here is, humans should do what humans are good at, which is, talking, brainstorming, making decisions, and let systems handle the back end data. And I think that just so accurately summarizes so much of what you talk about in the podcast and so much of what we do here at Third Wave.
Taking those tasks that are not necessarily value add, but are important to an organization, and automating what you can around that, and freeing up humans to do what they're good at is probably the best quote that we've ever, typed as we're, taking notes, talking with the customer. But, technology is changing so quickly. So it's exciting to kind of think about, what my daughters will be doing for jobs, because I'm sure the jobs haven't even been thought of yet, just because of exactly what you just said, which is, humans should do what humans are good at and let systems handle data. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of things that humans are doing right now, like picking items and, packing them in boxes. And, we're seeing some of that robotic automation in the large enterprise space, slowly starting to creep down into, the SME space. So, I think automation is certainly here to stay, Byron, and I think it's only going to get, more and more advanced and affordable, as the years go on.
Couldn't agree more.
One of the things that's important to think about is, that walking to the water cooler or that sitting in the lunchroom, that employee banter and the relationship around employees, that's certainly diminished in a virtual world that we're in. And one of the things that I read, Byron, is that's one of the big cases around why employees are leaving, is because they don't necessarily have that close connection with Byron, who's sitting next to me all day long. And, if I leave, Byron's going to be upset with me, right? How can you have a culture where everybody's kind of, disconnected from, the four walls of a building? What are some things that we can do to align that?
I think all employers are trying to figure this one out, and it's never going to be perfect. I think in any organization, I like to think about kind of the 20-60-20 rule, where 20% of people are going to be strong promoters, 20% of people are going to be detractors, and 60% are just going to be kind of somewhere in the middle, and you won't hear much from them. And so I think it's one of those things where, just like feedback, you have to try. You have to just take a first step. Something we tried out at Third Wave last week was adding in a little trivia game to our town hall, and our director of consulting put together a trivia platform within our Versago portal that allowed people to answer questions about their coworkers, and we had a leaderboard going as we went through each question. You could see the answer distribution and ask people why they chose certain answers, and just trying to bring together some of that casual conversation, that organic connection. And that's one approach. Approach is just looking at technology itself, of platforms like Slack or Teams. We use Teams internally, and Tyson, I know that if I see, the little green checkbox, I know I can either just ping you and ask if you're free, or just go ahead and give you a ring, and we can just hop on the phone just like we would if we were sitting in an office next to each other. And it's just it's a constant iterative process, kind of coupled with feedback. To go back to one of our earlier points, is seeing what works for the organization, for the people within your organization, to just try to bring together as many of those connections as you can.
I think companies are really going to kind of come out of this pandemic with kind of realizing that, strategy and employee engagement are really key foundation pieces to a strong organization, which ties into that quote at the beginning of the podcast today. So Byron, thank you for joining us today. It was great to spend some time with you, actually just, talking about what we're seeing with our customers, talking about some of your experiences and my experiences, and, what we're seeing in the marketplace and how, embracing the 4 C's for SAP Business One. And then today, the 4 P's for your business can really help you, get the most out of your organization, in this case, not just SAP Business One. So thanks for joining, Byron.
Thanks for having me on. I think this is a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. We spent a lot of time talking about it just in our one-on-ones. So it was great to be on the podcast and be able to record it and share it with our listeners.
Until next time, everyone, take care and stay connected.
As the original SAP Business One Gold partner in North America, Third Wave Business Systems in Wayne, New Jersey partners with hundreds of growing businesses, and we work hard to ensure that every one of them is grounded in the 4 C's. With SAP Business One at the core. Connected with their business ecosystem, enabling everyone to communicate with the core, and empowered with the control needed to thrive in a digital world. The 4 C's, Third Wave, and you. Talk to us.